We got our new turbo. Ooh, I am so stoked to get that in the car, and I want to do it today, but we're not. We're not going to be putting in the turbo quite yet because there's still a couple things that we're going to be pulling out of the car. So today we're going to be doing one of my favorite installs on the car, or removals, whatever you want to classify it as. But we're going to be removing the, oh wow, that's very bright. But we are going to be removing the secondary air pump out of the car, the entire system. We're going to be using these PRL Motorsports block-off plates, which I'm really excited to get on the car. So essentially what the secondary air pump does, if you're unfamiliar with it, is it just pumps fresh air into the car upon cold starts. It's really just emission based. It has no other purpose aside from that. So this is pretty much what it looks like in the front of the car. It's kind of pointless. There's two vacuum hoses on the back side of it. Outside of emissions, this thing serves absolutely no purpose at all. So we're going to be removing the rest of the system out of the car. There's two solenoids that we're going to have to be removing, which are up here in the front of the engine bay. Now there is a barometric pressure sensor inside of one of those solenoids that we're going to have to pull out, and you have to keep the barometric pressure sensor. So I found a couple old forums on Naziok from like 2008 of someone being able to cut out the barometric pressure sensor from the solenoid. We're going to give that a try. If I'm unable to get the sensor out of the solenoid, we're just gonna put one of the solenoids back in just to kind of make it work for what we need. The super simple install, it's not super simple. I don't suggest doing this unless you have your intake manifold off the car and at least the up pipe. Because if you're trying to do this with the intake manifold and the up pipe on the car, you're gonna hate your life. You're not gonna be able to get both of the block-off plates on the car. So while we have the turbo out, the up pipe off, and the intake manifold off, this is the ideal time to be able to put these block-off plates on there. So let's hop over to the car. I want to show you guys where the block-off plates sit, so that way if you are considering doing this, you at least know kind of where they're going to be going. And then after I do a rundown of that, we'll actually start pulling out the solenoid system and getting those block-off plates installed. So looking at our engine bay, you're generally going to have that big pump that sits right here next to the AC compressor. There's a tube that runs along the backside of the driver's side head that goes back here to these tubes that then connect up to these two solenoids. Now there's one block off plate right down here on the back of the block. Once we get some of this wiring stuff out of the way, I'll show you, but it's just a like aluminum steel tube that connects. And then the other one, this is the one that's more of a pain to get to, is going to be right down here. So the silver line that runs down, it sits right under the oil feed line for the turbo. So this is your oil turbo feed line, and then right underneath of that is that other tubing or hose for the secondary air pump. Now the solenoids themselves are going to be easy to pull out because it's just a couple of 12mm bolts that hold them in, so I'm not too concerned with getting those out. The thing that's going to concern me the most is getting this barometric pressure sensor off of the solenoid. I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna start pulling off the system. In order to get these solenoids out, as you can see right down here, there's a metal bracket coming off each of the solenoids. We're just gonna pull off those. I'm gonna disconnect this one barometric pressure sensor, and then there's two 10mm bolts that hold the hoses to the block for the exhaust gas to go through. I don't even know if it's exhaust gas, it might just be normal air that pumps through them. So I'm gonna go ahead, so one of them, like I said, is this silver tube that goes to the passenger side back of the block. The driver side is much more accessible. If you have the cylinder 4 cooling mod, it is going to be right adjacent to that. So let me get this camera set up here on a tripod. Let me start pulling this stuff out, and then once we get it off of the car, I'll go into a little more detail with you guys about how to get it off, where all the brackets line up and everything like that, because trying to see through this rat's nest of just wires and hoses is a little difficult to show you guys. So as you guys saw, I got a little happy with the Sawzall over there, mainly because of this tube here. So get off. So this tube ran across the top, and then that's what kept getting caught on things. And since I have absolutely no intention of putting this back in, I just cut the hell out of it. So one tube is out. This is the one that's really annoying to get out. Now all we have left is the driver's side. So after we get the driver's side out, I'll crawl under the car so that way you guys can see where these port locations are. But the next one is going to be right down here. So if you're looking at the solenoid, it's going to be right underneath of it. You can follow the silver tube down. It's connected to the block by two 10mm bolts. One solenoid out of the car. Let's get this one out. And then once we get this one out, I'll show you guys where the ports are on the back of the block for the passenger side and the driver's side. And then we'll start getting these block off plates installed. So I just swapped over to the smaller G7X camera. I have the EOS R up there right now, but I need to go under the car because I do want to show you guys the locations of those plugs. But this is everything that we pulled out here. So that is one solenoid. That's the main compressor. These are the hoses. That is one of the other hoses. And then this is the solenoid with the with the barometric pressure sensor in it. So I'm gonna hop into the car real quick. I want to show you guys where these plugs are so that way you're able to get to them as well. All right, so I apologize for the potential messed up audio, but right there in the center of the screen, you can see the open port. This is on the passenger side, so it's gonna be right under that oil feed line for the turbo and underneath of that bracket. So that's the one that's a huge pain to get to. Now let me shuffle over to the other side of the car and I'll show you the driver's side. Okay, so now we are looking at the driver's side and right there is the other port. That is going to be adjacent to where your cylinder 4 cooling mod would go, right behind the steering rack. So once again, apologize for the messed up camera stuff and audio. Little difficult to film down here, but I did want to show you guys those ports. So those are the two ports. I'm gonna set the camera up, or I'm just gonna knock out these block off plates real quick and get them installed. So the bigger one is gonna go on the driver's side, the smaller one's gonna go on the passenger side. I just have literally no room to get a camera down here to get these ports installed. But let me get the plugs installed back on the car. I'll show you guys the gaskets that go with each plug, and then I'm gonna scroll under here, get them installed, and then I'll bring the camera back down here and show you guys. So just like I was saying, these are the plugs. These are PRL Motorsports ones. They come with the hardware. You are gonna have to reuse your gaskets though. So this smaller gasket is gonna go with that one. The larger gasket is going to go with that one. So like I said, I'm gonna hop into the car. I'm gonna get these installed real quick. After I get them installed, I'll crawl back down there with this smaller camera, not the big boy because that thing's not fitting under the car. So let me get these installed real quick, knocked out, and then I'll grab the camera and I'll show you guys what they look like actually installed. And then we'll start working on getting that pressure sensor out of this solenoid. So I just got the plates installed. As you can see, there's one of them right down there on the back side of the block. I don't want to crawl back into the car right now, but they're going to be in the same location that they were before when we pulled them off. So now that we have all of the sensors, or now that we have the plates blocked off, so now that we have those blocked off, the next part is going to be frustrating. It's getting this barometric pressure sensor out of this. Now there's a couple ways to do this. People go around, they cut this with they try to cut this out. There's 4 plastic pins that hold the sensor into the solenoid. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna unbolt the bottom of the solenoid just to break off the 2 pieces, throw it back in the vice grip, and then start going to town on getting that guy off. This has been a huge pain. So I was able to get the sensor off of the old solenoid. Now I do want to show you guys exactly how I did this and how I was able to get this off. So if you look right there on the solenoid, you can see that one black spot right there. That's where these 2 prongs and that wire go through to connect to this. Now I was using as you guys saw, I cut this in half. You don't have to cut this in half, so I wasted a lot of time actually cutting that in half. All you have to do is chip off the black stuff holding the sensor to the top of the solenoid. So this was a huge pain. Glad I got it off. I'm gonna clean this up with a razor blade real quick, get it plugged back in and tucked away, and then this install's done. Well, this has been quite the endeavor. So I have this sensor cleaned up, looks beautiful. I'm gonna plug it back in here. And now we have our barometric pressure sensor reinstalled on the car. Now I need some electrical tape or some heat shrink to be able to wrap this up, so I'm going to grab some of that from the store today. I don't have any here in the shop, but once I get it wrapped up, we're just gonna tuck it away nicely just to keep it out, keep it clean, so that way we get accurate readings all the time. So that wraps up this install, or delete, call it whatever you want. 10 out of 10 was probably one of the worst I have not enjoyed this. So I did want to show you guys everything that we pulled out of the car for the secondary air pump delete. So that was the pump that was up in the front. This was that small tube that went to the back of the block. This is half of the solenoid. The other half is over there. And then all of this like copper spool was inside of that solenoid. So if you were seeing a whole bunch of like orange stuff flying out when I was cutting it, that's why. We have the other long crossover tube that went to the passenger side of the block. The pump like tubing that went from this pump to that pump to the solenoids. So all of that being out of the car is a huge plus for me, and it freed up a lot of room back here also, as well as up here. So not having that pump there, not having the 2 solenoids back there, and then we have our just barometric pressure sensor right here. So much more room has been freed up. So now we can actually get to doing all the fun installs. We're done removing things out of the car at this point. Like I said, I am gonna put some either heat wrap or electrical tape over that barometric pressure sensor just to keep it clean so that way no water's getting on it or anything like that. But that has freed up so much more room for us. I hate that secondary air injection system. I know it's for emissions. We don't have emissions in Washington State, so I'm not going to worry about it. So I'm more happy with having all of the open room now. So that was one of the oh geez, that's bright. That was one of the worst deletes, installs, whatever you call it. That was the worst one that we have done. I was not looking forward to doing this one, but we had to do it before doing the turbo and everything else, so I'm glad it's out of the way and finished. If this is something that you're contemplating doing, I do advise that keep in mind getting that sensor out of that solenoid is going to be the worst part. That probably took me about an hour to an hour and a half to get it out without destroying the sensor. There's 4 pins that go from the sensor into the solenoid and 2 wiring harnesses, or not 2 wiring harnesses, 2 wires that actuate the solenoid. So those are going to be right underneath of that plug where I showed you guys. So if you are going to do it, you don't have to cut it in half like I did. That was a waste of time. You can just start chipping away at all of like the black sealant holding the sensor to the solenoid to be able to get it off. So tomorrow I'm gonna start doing the up pipe, external wastegate. We're gonna get the turbo and the down pipe back on the car. I can't get the TGVs or any of the fuel stuff done until I get the fuel pressure regulator or the phenolic spacers for the TGVs. I also can't get the header back on yet because I don't have it. For those of you that did not know, or I don't remember if I said it or not, I did order a set of headers. I got the Killer Bee Holy headers on the way. I should get those next week, so we are going to equal length headers on the car. It's gonna help with reliability a lot, especially since we are gonna be pushing a little higher power out of the car. Being able to reduce the pulsation and the heat convection from the unequal length headers up into the block is going to be a huge plus for us. So that's all I got. Wanted to show you guys how to take all that stuff out because it's stupid and I don't like it. It's just a waste of space. Plus, I mean, I guess if you want to look at it from another standpoint, potentially weight reduction, maybe like 5 pounds. I could go on a diet and lose 5 pounds. I mean, I probably should. Ugh. Anyways, that's gonna wrap it up. If you liked the video, if it helped you, go ahead, hit that like button because I know there's not a lot of videos out there showing you how to do this secondary air pump delete the correct way, keeping the barometric sensor from that solenoid. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, which I would greatly appreciate because this is my full-time gig and I appreciate all the support and all the help from everyone. Let's go ahead and do that up here in this right corner, my right, your left top corner. That is still very bright. And with that, I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace out, homies. Woo!